the internal the
Welcome to the
internal
WOMMparty!
hello hello.
So happy you came.
Well, I look forward to these meetings. I feel like we shift what we're experiencing in our lives into something palatable and usable, and I don't know, I could feel growth.
You could feel growth. That's great. I love
Yeah.
growth. Speaking of growth, the first game at the WOMMparty today, show and tell.
Okay.
So find something to do show and tell with, either physical item in your space, or you can do something, you can do more of a non-physical story if you prefer. But or you can do a physical item and compare it and poetically, metaphorically compare it to a non-physical story in your life.
Um and maybe choose a theme that might help me.
Yeah, we just you just said one. I said speaking of what was it? Growth? Growth.
Okay. Something that represents growth. Um well, okay. I might as well do this one. So I have index cards that I have so many index cards, thousands of them really. That's not a hyperbole. Anyway, so this one is the story beats um for writing out stories, and the opening image, the theme stated, the setup, etc. There's only 15. I also have more on writing, but these are the ones that I've been recently bringing with me everywhere I go when I'm having conversations with people, watching shows, listening to things. Like I'm like trying to start to see the ebbs and flows. And recently I was thinking, what if I created an awareness of the ebbs and flows in my life based on quarterly um points in my life, or monthly, because like even within a TV show, each episode has like these story beats. What if I apply that to my own personal life and just was like aware of it and like actually started feeling into what that means?
Mm.
um and also I've been using them to kind of teach other people about their lives and like to notice um, the different ebbs and flows. But recently, I think the most recent thing I want to do is learn how to ask people questions to kind of map out their storyline of their growth, because that's what the story beats are, is just the ebbs and flows of growth. And yeah, that's my show and tell for today. How about you?
I just give me a moment here to embrace that. Yeah. Cool. Um yeah, well, I love that. How many story beats are there?
There are 15.
15. 4, 8, 12, 16. Huh.
Some story beats happen in a moment, though.
I just had a vision. Should I share it with you before I?
Please.
Yeah, so imagine imagine you led a cohort of between 5 and 10 people, and each week you would meet up and you would unpack each story beat. So each week would be focused on one story beat out of the 15. So it would be like a 15-week program. And the objective would be to help people understand um, the depth of story through like the different beats of, is it the hero's journey specifically?
So no, actually, this is with everything, all the things. Um,
What's the impact of understanding story at this level? Why are you diving into it so much at this of this of this? Like, what's the impact for you other than screenwriting?
Oh yeah. Okay. So I'm called to share about the mastery book, right? The mastery book talks about all these different people's journeys that they went on in order to like become the person that they were, these experts in their fields, and all these different things. And as I was listening to it, I was like, oh my God, they all had their different story beats within their life. Right. And I was like, oh, so I can apply this to not only film, but I can see other people who have done successful things and follow in their footsteps using these story beats layered with masteries, like plot points, if you will. And I can see how to apply it to my own life in order to achieve my own mastery. And it kind of like connects all the different things that I've been learning into a template, if you will, to use in my own life. And honestly, it's it's like bringing everything together. And I think that's what's exciting because like there's a lot of different books that actually pull the hero's journey, but the hero's journey is just one template. Um, the story beats, they go through all different genres, and they pretty much were like, okay, here's 10 different genres and here are the 15 story beats per genre, but like the story beats stay the same. And as I was learning about post-traumatic growth, which is like the other end of PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, it's very similar. And I'm like, oh, so this is how people recover from PTSD, generational trauma, any issues you're really coming up against. It just depends on what quote genre you're in right now. And then you apply it to your own life, and then you could overcome things. But the biggest thing about any of these stories is your hero must have a need. And your hero cannot be inactive. Your hero has to be in momentum, because they have something they have to achieve. And I think anybody who's trying to improve their life is going to have the action and momentum. And a lot of the other things, even the Think and Grow Rich book was like, you got to keep trying. If you didn't get it the right way the first time, you got to keep trying. And the story beats are really just that like resilience of like keep going at it until you find the right thing. And there's just a lot of power to that.
What do you think of this idea of having this story beat deep dive workshop, holding space for that for others?
I think you could almost do 3 story beats per, but some are like really quick.
But just because something is quick, it doesn't mean that it can't be like, I think a quick moment, you have to know it even better so that you can
Identify it.
you can really know that it's that, or you can be like creating it powerfully. Something that happens quick requires more awareness, not less.
Yeah, I suppose that's true.
But you could also, yes, do something that's, if it was, let's say, 3, 3, 6, 9, 12, 3, 6,
It'd be a
9, 12,
5-week course versus
5 week
15.
course. Yeah. You could hold a 5 week course between 5 and 10 clients, charging $500 a client, and you would make more than the money you need right now.
Yeah, I feel like I I was actually just thinking about this. About except for the number I chose was 100.
Too little.
Too little.
No, you're still not taking this particular lesson of people listen with the ears of what they pay.
That's,
If they pay $100, they're barely going to be engaged. They might not even come to some of them.
yeah,
Anything less than 500, like they might not even come.
yeah, definitely. Well, because like, you know, when there's a learning curve to something, I think in my mind I have to charge less when I'm learning how to do it for
No, no,
somebody.
no, no, no. Yeah. That's one of your big limiting beliefs because you're always learning stuff. You're never not going to be learning more about what you want to be engaged with. That's what makes you so cool is and because you're learning it too, you're all being curious together. And what you provide isn't the absolute expert, like genius PhD. You provide the person who's helping people learn how to be curious about stuff. Most people don't even know how to do that.
Yeah. Well, after I workshopped all these things, honestly, I'm like, wow, I'm starting to see things clearer and how to like identify them in real life. Um, but you really have to find people who are active in order to take this class because anybody who's inactive will say it won't work.
So that's actually a competitive advantage. And I'll tell you why. If you're putting out a class out there, instead of saying, this is for anyone who's interested in story, blah, 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 then that's like really kind of this, like, it's like this, no, like, okay, whatever. But if you're like, this class that I'm creating is specifically for people who are actively engaged in X, Y, or Z, then it almost brings people, hey, I'm engaged, like I want to be a part of this versus, and then it positions you as the person who's like, who's, who's the artistic authority. I want to work with somebody who wants to be working with actively engaged people. That gets people to step up to their plate.
Well, we had that okay. Whenever you present me with a question, right, I try to explore it. And your thing was like, what's a new declaration I could be making for shorter term and stuff. And the way I like to gamify life, I was like, okay, my next map that I need to unlock, right, is literally a new place, which is a new map in general. And I literally need to have money to unlock this new map. And that means I have to get a certain amount of resources collected by this specific day in order to make this happen. And I thought $10,000 is a great amount. And that's within, a few months. And I'm like, I could do that. Honestly, like my brain has been shifting to a point where I could do that, especially because I'm reading Think and Grow Rich. It's helping.
Yeah.
um, but after doing all these story beat things, I've been feeling way more empowered because I feel like, oh, if I'm just active enough and I have a strong enough need and desire for it, I will make the right choices to move in that direction. And it just helps lean into these different things
That's
that
it.
are
That's the
super
entire
powerful.
book.
Yeah.
But that
Yeah.
that is an important thing to be in practice with, right?
Yeah. And I think in a lot of ways I've been hemming and hawing at like needing to see what my momentum needs to be put towards. And but one of the things I wanted this year was to get a new home. And so this is a good way to make that happen.
Amen. Cool. Well, I'll do my show and tell. Um, growth. This is a red rhino, and it's interesting because I a while back, maybe 5-6 years ago, I'd say, was really into this idea of roaming rhino. And like I used hashtag roaming rhino, and I loved when I randomly spotted rhinos different places. And the reason I liked roaming rhino was because rhinos, like the animal, they've got these intense horns, and they're gigantic, and like they look very powerful. And yet the temperament of a rhino is almost always very gentle. And this beautiful intersection of power and gentleness has intrigued me for quite some time. And this particular plush is from a place called the Centre Pompidou in Paris, France. And I got it when I was in Paris studying with clown master Philippe Collier. And the Centre Pompidou is an unbelievable multi-leveled art space. And when I was in France in general, I was present to more profound art spaces than I'd ever known anywhere else. The level of depth and ingenuity and brilliance and modernity that the art spaces in France, specifically Paris, generate is beyond anything in the West that I've seen. And there's a lot of money poured into stuff in the West. It's not about the money, it's about the culture. And when you think about Paris, France, you think, I feel like, of like romance, you think of poetry, you think of like classical poets, and you think of like, of this je ne sais quoi, even that is a French saying for I don't know what. And it's this quality. It's a quality. And when I think of great art, of the best art, I think of this quality that really you can't describe anything other than je ne sais quoi. It's so, you can't use words to describe it because it evokes feelings. It actually ignites you. And the $10 million photograph is like, it's about making Toronto a place like that. Because the difference between Paris and Toronto is identity. We don't identify as a place of poetry and romance and of creating that je ne sais quoi energy. We identify as a place of, I don't know, we're not very clear, I feel like, in Toronto, what's our identity. And I think we're going through almost like this teenager phase of awkwardness where we don't really like what we were. We're not really sure what we're going to be. We're listening to all these voices of other people telling us what we should be. And what we need is some guidance of the soul. And the $10 million photograph represents that. And I wish we could move forward with that narrative in Toronto.
So how does the rhino invoke the $10 million photograph to you? Or is it of Toronto that it, like, maybe it makes you think of Toronto? Is that what
The
it is?
rhino, as I shared, is a symbol of the intersection of power and strength and gentleness. And Toronto has plenty of power and a decent amount of strength. And I think that what it needs right now is a heavy dose of gentleness. It needs the intersection of the two. And then the photo is about bringing the narrative. The strength is already here. What we need is the narrative, the symbol of a new possibility in the city.
Yeah. I think, you know, when I was talking to someone a while back, like they said each city kind of needs its identifier. You know, LA is for filmmakers and like people who want to make it big in film. You know, and et cetera, et cetera. Most cities have a thing. You know, some places there, which is Austin, Texas, is for people who love music, or, you know, so there's these identifiers that a whole city can come around. And if you don't have this identifier for your city, people don't know that that's what they're going there to congregate around, you know. And the right businesses will show up if that's your intention you set for the city, you know. um and everyone has to work together in a city if you're thinking citywide, you know. And I think, yeah, some communities have lost that, you know. I think some of the communities that died were because their identity, like, was some big manufacturing plant, and that manufacturing plant left and that whole city died because it was built
Detroit.
around that. So you either have to reclaim it or make something new, you know. There's a lot of infrastructure that could be reclaimed and reused. You just have to have the intention.
From the bottom up, I see this happening. Art is like fighting and fighting and fighting in Toronto to reclaim its message of humanity. And what's missing is the listening ears from those at the top.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like Portland is trying to fight back for its artisticness as well. Because like we're very go green here, very artsy here. Weird is a big identifier. But like with the amount of homelessness and all the other things going up in price, it's really shifted this whole energy that we have. And you shared that Lion King clip with me, and so I thought, okay, I'm gonna go watch the Lion King with you know.
I went
And
to go watch the Lion King after that too. That was the moment that came through for me though, when we were when you were sharing. I'm like, it is time. It literally came in my head. It is time.
but you know, when Scar took over the Pride Lands, you know, everything was dull, dead, and like out of balance, right?
Yeah.
And it was a whole community that was not being fed and not in balance and having this, you know, circle of life because it didn't have the right kind of ruler of it. It didn't have the right kind of leadership and direction. And, you know, I looked up what the theme of the Lion King is. The first thing I found was revenge. I'm like, I don't think that's really the theme of the film.
Revenge.
Yeah, well,
that's like colonial mindset.
Yeah, well, it was definitely Scar's theme, but it wasn't the movie's theme. The theme was, you know, pretty much leadership,
and ecosystems.
Yeah, and when you look at it through the lens of, you know, like, because what happened with Simba is essentially he's like, I'm ready to be this leader. I can't wait. And then like, you know, something really bad happens and he like kind of loses all that courage that he had, all that like excitement for this thing. And he just gave up this dream because he felt um scared of what others would think of him if they were to know that he was the reason behind his father dying, you know. And he allowed that to happen because like that voice from Scar in his head, they're like, oh yeah, you got to listen to this. And then he kind of became a freeloader and he fucked around for a while, right? And then responsibility is like, hey, we need you, like you're kind of the guy we need right now. And he's like, nah, I'm good, thanks, bye. But you know, Rafiki comes, hits him over the head and is like, dude, you know, it might hurt, but you learn from it. You know, that was his big lesson. And so then he runs back and does his
Love Rafiki.
oh man.
What a
Yeah.
great story.
Yeah. And so like I was like, okay, what is it that Simba really needed to remember? Right? Because that's what his father's like, remember. I'm like, okay, what I before I watched it, I was like, okay, I have to Google this. What was it that he needed to remember? And it was remember where you came from, remember like who you're connected to, and that like remember what your purpose is here, and like remember that desire, because he was really excited and needed to reconnect with that desire to like lead and be there and do the things. And you know, um it's okay to be scared as well, you know, but pushing past that. And so like the Lion King really does have a lot of messages behind it. And I think it's maybe the first film I saw in theaters. At least it's the first one I remember seeing in theaters, you know. I was like maybe 4 or 5 when it came out. But yeah, so it's very, but see, when I watch movies, these are some of the things that I pick up. And sometimes I'll research a little bit too. But you know, and then as I'm watching it, I'm pulling out the story beats, my little index cards, and like, oh, okay, and that's the catalyst. All right. Well, there's the midpoint, you know. And I'm really finally starting to understand how it all fits together, you know. And even like the opening image and the closing image, it's supposed to be like, you know, a reflection of how much has changed. Um, and he was the baby, and then eventually he had his own baby, and that's like the opening and closing image. And it follows this template, and yet it's just a Disney film, right? Disney's really good at using templates like this, I'm sure. And I feel like the more I become aware of these things, the more life makes way more sense too. And like people who are stagnant in life, oh, I get it. You haven't even tried to go on any form of journey, you know?
So now I have this idea of like, what's the framework, the simple framework for like everything. I'm just thinking like, what's the framework for this? What's the framework for this? Also, like, what's the keyword? This idea of like, what's the keyword? So if today the keyword is growth, um, then then that just helps me understand everything we're talking about. And so when you were sharing about how like kind of what does Simba need to remember? That's such a great question. What is Simba's dad telling him to remember? And I love how you picked up on this idea of remember that desire. Remember that desire. And so then the question that comes through to me is like, what is the template for remembering our desire? And then, yeah, what do you think the template is?
Um, you know, there was there was a lot of things that really made it like what is my desire, you know. And it's the thing that you keep pursuing even if you're pursuing it wrong, right? You're going to try something but you might do it wrong. um for example, if you're lonely, you might keep trying to date a lot of people. That's your strong need, right? But your mind, if you keep running into the same issue, you're probably doing it wrong. Maybe there's some healing work you personally need to do in order to not feel lonely, because in the long run, the lesson from that is you probably need to love yourself. And you are part of the reason that maybe loneliness comes through. Um,
Amen.
just saying, but this is an example, right? And so when you look at your behaviors and actions, there's going to be a repeating pattern. And it's probably behind a lot of the actions you're taking. And, it takes a lot of self-evaluation to really see that. But for example, I asked John, like, what's one of his strong desires right now? And he's like, finding a new place. I'm like, I'm not sure that is, because there's no action behind it. Usually you have an action behind it. You're doing something actively to lead towards that action. And you can reawaken that desire and actually reawaken action towards that desire, if that's really what it is. But, what I was seeing was that he was actually comfortable with being uncomfortable, right? And that was maybe more his desire in the moment, right? You're okay being uncomfortable in our living situation. And that's fine. That's fine. But like, if your true desire was a new place,
Acknowledge it.
yeah. um, and that's kind of like that moment of remember what you want, and do something about it. But doing something is scary. It's taking action on something.
So I'm studying for this. On Thursday, I'm going to be leading a workshop on resiliency with fundamentals of play. And there are 4 steps to a growth mindset that we teach. And it sounds connected because the 4th step of this is action. And so the 4 steps to a growth mindset are: 1, learn how to hear the fixed mindset through either the way that you're speaking or in your own thoughts or the way other people are speaking. Number 2 is recognizing that there's a choice, and like that you're at a crossroads between choosing to just listen to the fixed mindset or make a change. The 3rd is to talk back gently with a growth mindset, is to meet the fixed mindset with a growth mindset piece and give yourself the choice of action. And then the 4th piece is to take growth action, is to actually listen to the growth mindset and take the action of the growth mindset rather than the action of the fixed mindset. And so essentially it's if we're like applying this, 1, 2, 3, 4 to this idea of remembering your desire, it would be like, I would say, notice when you are unclear of your desire. And then ask the question, what is my desire? And then answer the question. And then take action based on answer. As a first draft. But
Gotta start somewhere, right?
it's essentially notice, ask, answer, act. Ask, answer, act.
ask affirm action. I'm just kidding. That was the thing I was talking about the other day.
Well, there you go. I was thinking of that the whole time I was saying this. I'm like, I feel like it's exactly what we were talking about the other day. Ask, affirm, action. But
I
it's
think the
related
fourth
specifically
resistance.
to our desire. Um,
Yeah. Well, again, you can use that little template for practically anything. Oh, and I wanted to bring up a little bit about you sending me the thing about writing a sermon, right?
mm,
Um, and like choosing a word, like these are the lessons, or these are the principles, or these are
like
the
a magic word, a
yeah,
keyword.
the keywords. And some of the format that goes along with that too. And but also the fact that it was religious. Now, when it comes to going on your own journey, generally your past is part of the solution for your current problem. But you've gotten so far away from your past that it takes a moment to have a aha, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so beginning life, new life equals future. And you know, I grew up in the church, I used to like be around church a lot, and I was like, oh, is that the past life that I need to like embrace it, or like that's the area of my life that might have some answers that I didn't quite see, because church actually, you know, if you want to talk about who's the best at marketing, churches are, right? Um, and they definitely have a lot of templates around word of mouth, spreading the word of the Lord. Also, my church was very good about like creating these little um, activity sheets, if you will, for the people who attend, and pretty much like the pastor would give these lessons and leave little blanks. So while he was talking, people could fill in the blanks based on his slides and stuff. I think that keeps people engaged. But they also have like door greeters to like shake people's hands when they walk in, like here,
You've
you're
mentioned
you're
this
welcome.
before.
Yeah. And so like how do we have some of these things in our life that could actually mm, weave back into what we're building now when it comes to community building, when it comes to um helping people learn things, because if we're talking about selling packages for, um I don't know, learning how to story beat your life. That sounds weird. Um but like how do you apply old lessons and old things that work for you? Because if you look at it on a neurological level, you learned a specific routine as a child for maybe taking physical notes because there wasn't computers, right? And so that might be tapping into an older part of your brain that unlocks stuff that you haven't even thought about in a while. One woman recently, she was like, I wrote with my left hand one time and so much more came out from just writing with her left hand, like memories and stuff. And I was like, well, that was interesting because she's right-handed, right? And so we encode things in our body in memory physically too. And so how does tapping into old um crafts that you cared about, or tapping into whatever, I think that's why including your past and your present to make your future is so important, because it does unlock a lot of that.
What really stuck out to me was this idea of that we're up to helping people learn things. I find, imagine if the school board's motto was helping people learn things. Like, I feel like that's not the goal of the school board. Like, is it to help people learn things? If it was, like, I just feel like, imagine if everything was designed around that one idea of helping people learn things. There would We would be rethinking grades, we would be rethinking so many parts of it. Is like, is this the most effective way for people to learn things? um and just this idea of like that's really kind of what we're up to. And I also loved how you were sharing kind of how when you know your desire, you pursue it, but you might be pursuing it wrong. And so helping people identify when they're pursuing something incorrectly, it's like not just learn things, but learn things in a way that is helpful to themselves and others.
Well, it's like learning the moral of the story. If you run into an issue, you got to learn from your mistakes, right? But you also have to have the courage to try again differently. But if you're doing it just for the second time, you're going to be carrying over a lot of what you learned the first time. And, PTSD is a good example of like carrying over things from your first experience. You've learned that this scary thing is bad, avoid it at all costs. Well, really, it's not that. You probably have to face your fears, and exposure therapy is a thing for a reason. Um, and then when you face this fear, you can try new things. But if you keep trying the same thing, then you're not going to see new results, right? Um, and you really have to like it, trial and error it. But part of you has to heal and change and learn from that experience, because I don't think it's possible to achieve the goals. Or maybe you just need someone else in the picture to help guide you, right? You need some mentor to be like, hey, by the way, maybe try this thing. So someone who's had experience guide you a little bit, because that's what's missing from that experience, or a lack of guidance. Sometimes you need your mentor to disappear before you're like, oh, I need to do this differently. But that tends to happen towards the end of your aha.
What do you think is the best thing that we do, like the two of us?
Workshop ideas. No. I mean that for sure. We
Yeah,
definitely are. We're
workshop
good at,
ideas.
yeah, but we're good at like workshopping them in a way that's healthier than maybe done different like in the past by other groups and individuals. I feel like we try to do it with a growth mindset in general.
So our what we're the best at is workshopping ideas in a way that's healthier than usual and with a growth mindset.
And with a growth mindset, yeah.
Healthier than what? Healthier than
Um,
the norm?
yeah. I mean, or the majority of people. I don't know. I think the way we think is very optimistic in a very pessimistic world. But I think we've also both endured journeys that made us learn how to overcome these other mindsets that other people haven't started the journey. But because we're on our journey, we're definitely influencing other people.
Hmm. It's very interesting.
Well, I mean, you said our keyword was growth, right?
So when you talk about the next map as a new map, how what do you, how do you approach a new map? You don't have the map yet, or how does it work if it's
So
new?
I think about these big maps in video games where it has all these different regions, right? And you can't get to a new region of that map until you've unlocked something. And so it's kind of grayed out. Or the difficulty is too high. It's that too. Um and so depending on which game you're playing. But some of it, some games have it, you have to explore that area before you've really unlocked it. And I think for what I'm doing, mine is like a grayed out area, or the level's just too high for where I am right now. And I have to achieve a bunch of different challenges in order to unlock the area. You know, couple games come to mind. The Phoenix Rising game, which I don't think you've played or watched people play. And then the other one is Grand Theft Auto. I don't know if you ever seen that one.
Yeah, I've played
Um,
that.
okay. And so like, some of the regions on that you just have to explore to open it up, right? But it has that overview of the different areas, but not until you go into a new area, I think, does it unlock what you can see. And then there's little icons on each of these maps of things that you could be doing for like little missions or whatever. Um, and different shops that pop up and whatever. But like if you haven't really explored a region, you don't know what's possible and available in that area either. But those might be providing stronger tools, better resources, or people you need to talk to in order to move your storyline forward. In Phoenix Rising, they have these different gods that have been turned into something else, and you have to essentially do all these different tasks in order to revert them back to their godlike form. And specific ones give you extra quote powers, in a lot of ways. Like when we do things for other people to help them move their storyline forward, you are unlocking new powers. You are um being gifted something. Maybe it's a connection, or maybe it's a new skill, and but the more you face these little battles, just fighting like normal beasts in the map, you're still leveling yourself up enough to upgrade your armor or your weapons, etc. And like, what's the equivalent of that? Maybe that's your technology, maybe that's your resilience to narcissists, whatever it is, right? And so like there's a lot of translation between video games and life, as long as you start noticing where it translates, um, and compare it. At least that's what I've been up to.
If you were to make a 1 minute video that teased the $10 million photograph to the Mervish village people, how would you create that? What would you put in that?
Well, based on some of the conversations from our interviews that we've had on our podcast, I'd say that part of it, you have to make them see why it matters to them, what connects them to the photo maybe more than other people. Why does this photo matter to them? Um, and like, the what's in it for me kind of thing is what they would be asking. Um, and but also, you know people like a story. Storytellers are the ones that make things go. So telling some kind of story would be impactful too, I'm sure. Something that tugs emotionally. Um, yeah, those are things I would probably add into it.
So why do you think it matters to Ian Gillespie to buy the $10 million photograph?
Well, you know, he's been on his own journey, right? And this is like the beginning image, the beginning image of his story to where his has been taking him, and the history and evolution of this journey. But also it intertwines with yours. Um, and kind of like the impact could have more ripples than any other photograph. And it all is because he went on his own journey and like kind of feeding the ego of that too. But it's not just feeding the ego, it really is having a wide impact, and just like honoring and recognizing that, I think, is powerful.
On the West Bank website, it says building artistry. And I feel like what we're doing at WOM is we're artistry building. And when you talk about this, how it intertwines, it's almost like me and Ian have come at life in opposite directions and are intersecting at the same spot, coming at it from the opposite way. And I've been up to building artistry through the doing of art and the empowering of artists, and he's been up to the building artistry by building places where art is a core feature, so that art is visible and invested in. And essentially, what could happen when those two worlds merge is the possibility of the $10 million photograph.
Yeah, back to the story beats, because that's what I've been doing. He's been having his own story beat card, and so have you, but you can have multiple narratives within one larger story. It's just a matter of perspective of who's narrating the story. And I think that if you were to look at the journey he's been on in comparison to the journey you've been on, like if you were to see the overhead shot of both of these narratives interweaving, it might take till the end of the story before everyone intersects. Some films that have multiple main characters, they might not all meet each other till the end of the movie anyway. And I think that's like, but they were the key factors to making a complete story. And I don't know, I feel like based on just what I've learned and done some research around too about this guy, like it really does feel like he's the guy. When my desire to really want to tell the story of the $10 million photograph as I've witnessed it really made me think, well, damn, like this needs to be a movie. And if I think, damn, this needs to be a movie, that means that all the things intertwining are as they should be, and that this is the right direction, and that this would make a great film. And if it makes a great film, that means like there's got to be other people who see the beauty in it, and the like power of it. And your determination and this declaration that you've made is really what's going to allow it to be possible, because you have a need. And the theme of the story is around artistry.
I love what you drew with the eye.
Oh, yeah. It was an interesting request.
What did you make of it?
Um, well, part of me was like, do I draw the pupil? And I was like, I think that's kind of the point is you can't see, right? And so I didn't draw the pupil. Um, the X is kind of like the blinding factor. Um, or it's the reflection of what you're seeing before you, which it was not really the vibe I got. But I feel like you know, people who are blind, really, it's just this foggy kind of grayish blue color, right? But like this is more direct of like you can't see, you know. Um, I don't know. I feel like there's a lot of blind people out there though. To what's possible at least. Not not literally.
It's a metaphor,
Yeah.
absolutely. And I think it's a powerful metaphor for all of the senses is what would we be without our senses?
Well, they also say if one of your senses isn't working well, the other ones are compensating more. So, I mean, it's really tapping into your other senses. But if you're fully blind with your all your
All
senses,
senses.
that I would say is someone who's dead,
Yeah. Yeah.
dead or asleep, right?
I feel like you still sense things when you're asleep. Usually
That's true.
there's some sensing that's occurring. Um I think it's going to be starting soon to be time to start referring to each other as memory makers. Because if we're a world of memory makers, then that means the community that we're building is the community of memory makers, of self acknowledged memory makers, people who are taking accountability and responsibility for making the memories that compose our lives. And what memories are we choosing to make and
Well,
remember?
when you go, yeah, when you go on that journey and you want to make a film about it, then obviously you're making memories that should last longer than the lived experience of it, you know? Um, and so like you're living a life worth making a film about, you know? And I think that's a world of memory makers too. Like when you're like,
Yeah,
I should
living a
be
life worth making a film about, which is why it makes so much sense that we ended up in partnership.
well, one of the things I wanted to do was capture what people have been doing with their lives and their journey and like what's quote what's their cathedral, you know? Like what is that dream vision you stepped into and that you found and made a reality and and or what reality did you step into that's worth watching, worth seeing, you know?
Are you going to make a film about this process one day?
I mean, I have a few things that I want to make, and your story is definitely very intriguing. And I've been contemplating like what were the story beats of your life while I've been witness to it, you know?
Is
So
the answer I don't know.
I think the answer is yes, but I'm not sure when.
I'm not saying tomorrow. I'm just curious what your thought was. Okay, well, thanks for coming to the party.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
This was a
And
blast as always, profound as always. I just feel like I think it's cool because I actually think we're at the stage where our themes just keep repeating over and over again. I think once something repeats a lot, then that means you're in a new stage, right?
yeah, well, that, or you finally are getting to a point where you learn it and it becomes automatic, and then you can move on to the next thing. So
Like a
yeah.
new stage, maybe? New
Yes.
stage, new map. It's
Yeah.
time to start exploring this new stage, new map, and I think that stage is called scaling.
Woo! All right.
We
Well,
have really been up to some cool work up until now, and I think I'm really impressed with what we've done and what we're going to be creating this year. It's going to be fire.
yes. And on that note, ta-ta for now, Phil.
Bye.